Okay. Okay, so physical development. Again, most people find this one fairly easy because it's not too far from where you are at in life for most of you. So you just went through most of this. So it's actually one of the easier sections because you lived through it, and some of you are still living through it, depending on your age. So it's the stage between childhood and adulthood. And girls go through their growth spurt 2 years earlier than boys. So usually we see girls uh, probably around end of fourth grade, fifth grade, starting to grow dramatically compared to their male classmates. Puberty, we remember good old puberty and all our presentations that you've had in your life in health class. You're from the generation that people actually talked about sex and actually taught about sex. My generation, we got shoved in an auditorium. The boys were out on the playground, the girls, they covered the windows, pulled down the shades, and we watched the dancing sperm and the happy egg. Honest to God, that was the name of the video. So big difference now that young people can ask questions. They have the internet, which we didn't have in my generation either. So if your parents really didn't talk about it or your science teacher didn't talk about it, you just kind of learned on your own. And in many cases, even the boys weren't given formal instruction. They learned from their dads or from other guys. So, what's going on. So girls around 11 or 12, boys around 13 or 14. Girls' menstruation starts, that's really the dead giveaway that you are now sexually uh, mature. It means that you are now able to conceive a child. As girls grow, their hips actually are wider, a little more fat on their body. And again, that's to help prepare you to eventually give birth. When we talk about environment and stress, stress can bring on puberty a little bit earlier. Women who are athletes, though, it actually can stop your menstrual cycle. Um, so every girl is different. There is a genetic kind of push from what your mom, was for the start of her period, but good food and we're not working in factories and things like the working 12-hour days. So there is a secular trend that it's much earlier. And again, the earliest birth that I know of in Pittsburgh, the young girl was 8. So I don't know about you, ladies in here. At 8, I was still playing with Barbie, but it can happen. So the primary sex characteristics are the organs. Okay, so vagina, uterus. Secondary characteristics would be breast buds, pubic hair, and the changes in uh, puberty can cause some young girls to have depression or anger or frustration. Um, how much depends again on the girl and her circumstances. Puberty in boys, the growth of the penis and the scrotum occurs around 12 and continues to go on for about 4 years. Spermarchy, which is first wet dream, basically. First ejaculation for most boys starts around 13. Secondary sex characteristics, the voice deepens, and, hair under the armpits and on the chest and on the legs. Um, these are the traditional things, and again, they can occur over that period of time. And then the change, of course, in their height. There can be large fluctuations in height between 13 and 18. When we talk about body image and physical changes, body image does have an effect on an adolescent's reaction. Boys' ejaculation is rarely discussed. It's not something that comes up in dinner conversation. Girls tend to have a higher self-esteem and rise in status and in self-awareness when they actually start menstruating. Um, Girls sometimes are unhappy with the development of the bodies, or they feel that they're fat, and we see at this age a lot of times young girls dieting. This is too early for girls to be dieting. When you have a young girl who's actually, a size 2 and she sees herself as fat, this could be the start of anorexia or bulimia. So it's something that parents have to look out for. There are strong societal pressures on looks, especially for young girls. Late maturation is uh, troublesome sometimes for girls when everyone in their class is developing their breasts and they're getting taller. For early maturation, well, that can be a real positive for boys because they tend to be taller. They tend to be more athletic. They're not as lanky and uncoordinated. So it tends to be more of a positive self-esteem boost for boys who mature early. But the research also shows that they may start hanging out with older kids because they feel more comfortable with kids that look like them. So there's some research that shows they could kind of fall in with an older crowd that might try alcohol or drugs earlier. Girls sometimes are uncomfortable with their bodies, especially until their cycle is regulated. For the guys in the class, you may not know that at the beginning. It's not every month. It could be, you know, once every 2 months, or sometimes you can have two periods in 1 month. And until the girl gets regulated, girls tend to be more popular. Um, they're not really ready at this point at like fifth grade to be dating, but some parents do allow their fifth and sixth graders to date, especially older guys. So, so there, it depends too, your culture. Here in Western culture, we're a little freer, whereas in some of the Eastern traditions, it's not really a cultural norm to talk about this. Late maturation for boys is difficult. Again, imagine you're in high school and you're 4 foot whatever, and most of the kids around you have gone through puberty and they're, 5'9", 6 foot. It can be very, very difficult for boys because a lot of times they feel that they're less attractive. Again, they haven't that full muscle development yet, so they tend to be poor in sports. So they may have trouble dating. It's still a stereotype many times. Young girls want to date a young man who's taller than them. So if the girl has already gone through puberty and she's already 2 years ahead height-wise, that can lead to some problems with self-concept, what they feel about themselves. But, talking to these young men, helping them to understand that everyone's kind of on this curve, it may help them to feel better. Um, Girls can be overlooked or have low status if they haven't developed, early, like some of their other ones. They may seem that they have to do something to help themselves. So they may try different diets and exercise and going online and, reading whatever they can get a hold of. If they are lucky enough to have parents that are willing to talk about this, that can be very beneficial. So, with the adolescent growth spurt, they require more food. Girls on average need about 2,200 calories a day, and boys need about 2,800 calories a day. It also depends on how fast they're burning calories. Obesity is a common concern during adolescence. 1 in 5 are overweight, and 1 in 20 are clinically obese. And again, the consequences of just severely focusing on your body and what it looks like, and if it doesn't look like what society says is the norm, then there can be potential health concerns. So, obese adolescents actually have an 80% chance of being an obese adult. And I always share, personal stories to help you remember. I was skinny as anything when I was in second grade because my tonsils and my adenoids were so large that I could just barely swallow anything. And then once I got those tonsils out, I ate and ate. And, food was kind of like a comfort thing and a reward. So I was overweight as a child. And overweight as adult, better than I was though. In the last 10 years, I've actually lost 100 pounds. So yay! But still have a long way to go. But there are health concerns because we do have so many adolescents that are obese. Um, and it's such a negative thing, physically, just being a little overweight, you're moving and you're active, and that's okay. But when it gets to the point that you have trouble doing the normal everyday things, lack of exercise, again, kids don't go outside anymore. They sit in front of screens, much more sedentary lifestyle. Fast food isn't always the best. There are some fast food options at our fast food places, but when you go to Wendy's, you're not necessarily thinking about a salad. So it's something that has to kind of come from the family or the family doctor or the person themselves realizing that they want to change. Anorexia, again, and bulimia are issues. Anorexia is a severe eating disorder. People do die from anorexia. Um, they look in the mirror, and even though they're a size 2, they see themselves as a size 18. They are thin, but they see themselves as fat. So anorexia out of the two, between anorexia and bulimia, is the hardest to help the person deal with and gain control over this eating disorder. As I said, 15 to 20% starve themselves to death. These are, intelligent, attractive, successful, affluent people. It can happen anytime in your life. We just see a large portion of adolescents and emerging adults that deal with this issue. And about 10% of anorexics are male, and about 5% are homosexual, are anorexics. And that's one of the things in the homosexual community, um, looks. And if you feel you don't look like you believe you should look, even though you physically are fine, but you see yourself differently. And that's why it's so hard to control. And there are actually websites out there that are what we call Annie websites, where they look like they're just telling you about all the bad things about anorexia. But if you go through the pages and the links further into the website, you'll find some of them are actually telling young girls and young guys how to be an anorexic and how to get away with it. And once things get on the internet, they're there forever. So trying to pay attention as a parent to what your children are looking at and searching for, may be able to stop this in the bud. But it's out there, and people think these websites are just fine until you actually go through and read the entire website. So for anorexia, people sometimes, let me pop off of here for a second. Uh, for anorexia, like I said, young girls see themselves as fat. Um, they intake calories and they count calories, some to the extreme of actually weighing all their food and measuring the amount of fluids that they're taking into their body. And what I mean by extreme, they also measure the amount of waste products that are eliminated through their body. So they actually measure the amount of urine that they excrete and how much they defecate. And if it's not equal, they take laxatives, they cause themselves to throw up, or they starve themselves even more. Whereas bulimia, it's something that's easier to deal with, not that it's any less of a concern. It's just easier to help people who are bulimics. And that's because they know they're doing it. They see themselves as they are. It's a control issue. So they binge. So they're hungry and they don't eat just one slice of pizza or two. They eat the entire pizza. And then they feel really guilty about it because they lost control. So they take laxatives or they induce vomiting. Again, bulimics a lot of times end up with GERD because as they throw up, the acid burns their esophagus, problems with their teeth and their gums. It can actually cause heart failure. So there are a whole bunch of different methods to help people that are bulimic because they know they're doing it. So it's getting them to realize what they're doing and help them to get a handle on controlling this almost obsession with food. Or if they've been limited from food, they hide in the bathroom, they sneak food into the bathroom and then they wolf it down. And then a couple hours later, they feel so bad that they did that. Then they go back in the bathroom and they throw up. Like I said, anorexia is a lot harder because they don't see themselves as thin. There's a model, and I'll try to put the link up on Blackboard. Uh, she was a model in Italy, and she posed nude for billboards because she was anorexic from like when she was 5. She was abused when she was younger. So thin. I mean, you can literally see her bones. Her skin was breaking down because of the lack of nutrition. She started on a program, but she said she wanted people to realize what this disorder is and what it does to you, especially in the fashion industry. We see a lot of our models are anorexic. They don't eat enough the food that they really need to be healthy. At one point, as an adult, she was down to like 80 pounds. Um, and I wish I could say good news, that it was done for Dateline. They interviewed her. She was excited. She could almost drink a half a cup of tea, and she was excited. She was gaining a pound every 2 or 3 weeks. And that isn't enough to sustain her. And regrettably, she did die from the disorder. So, yes, you can die from anorexia. Cognitively, the brain is still growing. The frontal lobe continues to grow until you're 25, and your brain prunes away uh, neuro net parts to make it the fastest to communicate with brain and the rest of the body. Um, Adolescent thinking, of course, becomes much more sophisticated. They can definitely hold conversations with adults, sometimes more than just, adults, uh, depending on where they're coming from. I had the opportunity of running a youth group, and I had two young people, one 14, one 16, that were homeschooled from California. And then when they came to Pittsburgh, the 14-year-old got to skip all of high school. She actually was admitted as a freshman at Duquesne, and the 16-year-old was admitted to graduate school at Duquesne at the age of 16. So, intelligence-wise, they were great. Social skills were still that of like a 14 or a 16-year-old. So they had a lot of hard time relating with kids their age. They preferred to speak with adults. And I'll be honest, the one time there was a group of us, three adults around, and the young man came over and he was talking about his project that he was doing in physics at uh, Duquesne. And we just kind of looked at each other because none of us knew what he was talking about. It was so far above our head. We were like, wow. So we could understand why he may have had trouble, you know, dealing with younger individuals, his peers, when he couldn't communicate like the younger individuals. He learned a lot while he was in the group. He participated in the social activities, but more times than not, he was hanging out with the adults more than his peers. Adolescents can, have low impulse control sometimes. They can be immature and they participate sometimes in risky, impulsive behaviors, and they sometimes underestimate the risk. So they try things that, we as adults may not try, and they overestimate the reward of doing that. So they don't always think about the negative things that can occur. Adolescent brain and the death penalty. Still, we do have in the books that no one younger than 18 can be executed. They can receive life in prison, though. And the argument is, well, if they're committing an adult crime, then shouldn't they be tried as an adult? Well, if they're 14, they have an adolescent brain, their frontal lobe, which is all their executive functioning, all their decision making, isn't fully developed until they're 25. So even though they may have committed an adult crime, their brain is still thinking like a 14-year-old. So you can find just as many psychologists on one side of the aisle as the other saying, hey, this isn't an adult making decisions. They're still making impulsive decisions. They may not think about the consequences of their behavior, but now you're saying you're going to put this person in prison for their life. Sleep deprivation. This is a big one for young people. Um, at adolescence through young adult, you should be getting 9 hours of sleep a night. Now, let's think about that. Do you get 9 hours of sleep a night? Don't have to answer, but think about that. If you're not and you're 25 and under, you are sleep deprived. And just sleeping in on Saturday and Sunday when you may be off isn't doing it. Your body needs REM sleep. That's rapid eye movement. That's when your brain is most active, and it's when most dreaming occurs. And young adults need to sleep, but they're in high school or in college. They have schoolwork to do. They may be involved in athletics after school. They may have a job. They may have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. They get home, you know, depending on what school, it could be anywhere between a half hour to 4 hours of homework. And, after that, they don't want to go to bed. They're going to be on social media, or they just want to watch a movie, or they just want to do something, play a game, play Fortnite. Um, so they don't always go to bed. Even they may go in their room, but they don't necessarily go to bed at 11 or 11:30. Some of them go to bed at 2, 3 in the morning, and they have to be at school the next day by 7:30. So first period classes, they're like laying on the desk, they're yawning, they're tired. They drink coffee and energy drinks. Energy drinks are not very good for you, by the way. It's an occasional one here and there. You might be fine. But, there are some kids that down 3 or 4 of them a day just to make it through the day. So they're sleepy, they're having a hard time paying attention. They tend to be more depressed. And of course, adolescents with the hormone changes, they go through mood swings. Review, sample question, sample question. Drug use, 1 in 15 high school seniors use marijuana daily. Some do it just to seek pleasure. It feels good. Or some do it just to escape pressure they may be under, or if they just want to fit in, and the people they want to fit in with are using drugs, so they try drugs. Uh, some use stimulants to improve their academic performance. Young people who have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, may be uh, prescribed something like Adderall or Ritalin or Strattera, which can really help them to focus. Those drugs were never meant to just be drugs alone. It should be, a drug to help this young person to regulate themselves, but they should also have behavioral therapy that possibly sometime they can be completely off of the drug. But what happens is, I think Adderall right now is going for about $5 or $6 a pill. Kids will take their prescription, their parents fill it up. They think their kid is taking their prescription because they've kind of learned to control their behavior on their own, and they sell them. They sell them to people who don't need Adderall. So it's a stimulant, and that's illegal to do that, to use someone else's medication. It can actually be addictive, physically and psychologically, and you can become dependent on it. And um, sometimes they never get out of that vicious cycle. And sometimes, people may start with something as stimulants like that are available, and they may move to something that's more dangerous. Alcohol and abuse, more than 75% of college students have consumed alcohol in the last 30 days, and I am betting that's actually higher since COVID. Some of these statistics came in 2018, so I'm sure it's higher now. More than 40% say they've had 5 or more drinks in the past 2 weeks. Again, you don't have to share. 76% of high school seniors drink alcohol, and 2/5 of eighth graders have had alcohol, and 1/10 of sixth graders have had alcohol. And we're not talking just your parents let you have a glass of wine at dinner one time. Binge drinking is a problem on many college campuses. Um, Five or more drinks for men, four or more for women in one sitting over a short period of time. A lot of high school kids, since they know they can't take alcohol like into a football game, will go somewhere, and it's going to sound really weird, like a cemetery, and binge drink, like drink, a large quantity in a very short period of time. And that is also very dangerous. Um, 50% of males, 40% of females report binge drinking in the past 2 weeks. Again, 50% and 40% have binge drinking in the last 2 weeks. So it does damage the brain. Drinkers, again, the chart, you don't have to memorize the chart, but if you can just see the difference between men and women, women aren't that far behind. Consuming more than five or one drinks, you know, especially if you have someone who's buying the drinks for you. Let me pop off for a second. I see a couple chat questions, so I'm going to try to see if I can. Okay. Yep. Okay. Good. Congratulations. I'm glad you did that. That's awesome, Charlie. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I've known some very awesome people who have had problems with alcohol and drug use. Remember, alcohol is a drug, it's just a legal one. A good friend of mine who was a Notre Dame graduate died in a hotel room, overdosing, had everything going for him. But, the drugs just can destroy lives. That's the best way that I can say that. But let me pop back on. So, why do adolescents drink? Well, I said I teach high school boys. And I do. I ask, because I teach AP Psych, and I'll come right and ask them, and they know they can talk to me in class. So, um, relieve stress, tension, want to get along. They want to feel big. They want to, show they can do it. And they'll say, well, everyone else is doing it. Well, no, not everyone is doing it, but they are right. A lot of people are doing it. But they can develop a tolerance so they don't get the same high as they did before. And that's the same way with drugs. If you look on the Blackboard site, I have a link to the bird video. I don't know if you've ever seen it before, but it's just a short video that it has it's like a cartoon, but it shows this bird taking a drug and it gets this big high and it flies high. And then the drug wears off, so it goes down. So then it takes another bit of the drug and it has a high. And then after a couple times, the high isn't as high. So they have to use it more often or use more of it. And it just shows how drugs can lead us nowhere. Now, we're not talking prescription drugs that you've been prescribed by a physician for something that you have as a disorder that you need to take that. We're talking about other drugs that are not prescribed for you that people choose to take. So, stress, we see a lot of people, around midterms and finals at the college level that are drinking, especially like Friday night. You've had a really tough week at school. Friday night, you can, like, yeah, I don't have to do anything yet. I can do work on the weekend. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to drink and use drugs. and sometimes too much. So, what are some things that you can look for? Uh, People who use drugs can cover up for a really long time, but eventually uh, you can tell. They identify with the drug culture, and you can actually see physical signs of deterioration. They don't change their clothes, they don't wash their hair, they don't even wash their face, they don't shower. They just they just look so much worse than they did before. Changes in behavior, things that they used to love to do, they don't want to do anymore. All they do is want to do drugs. Tobacco, the dangers of smoking, you know, we, my generation, I'm old, so I'm 67. We used to watch people on TV smoke. They were doing the news and sitting there smoking a cigarette right on TV. There were commercials, there were ads for different types of cigarettes. I think I may have mentioned Camel. They did in the early days, if you send so many box tops in, you got one of those stuffed Joe Cool camels. And the more box tops you send in, you got bigger ones, and they would give them to their kid. And, I had a friend who had one of these, and I swear this camel was like 5 foot tall and round, and it's a camel, and it has a cigarette coming out, a lit cigarette. It looks like it's lit coming out of its mouth, and Joe Cool Camel. And it was sitting on their bed. And I kept thinking, now my parents didn't smoke. So, I wasn't exposed to that early, but my cousin smoked. And I can remember one time, she said, "Oh, come to the bathroom with me." And I went with her over at her house. Their bathroom was upstairs. And she closed the door and she put towels in front of the bottom of the door. And she's like, "You want to share a cigarette?" And I'm like, "No, you smoke?" Uh-huh. And till this day, and she's 5 years older than me, she still smokes. So, smoking early, a lot of times, can be something that you're going to see that will continue. Many, many different types of methods are out there to help people stop smoking. But if they don't want to stop, you can't make them. There are drugs that you can be given that every time you inhale a cigarette, it actually makes you nauseous, like you want to throw up. And there will people that will even work through that. But there are more and more people that are not smoking. But we do see a lot more of low socioeconomic and African American children. And many times they smoke because of the menthol, the flavoring. And that's the problems with vapes, with the different flavors. That's how they can get you addicted. So why do they smoke? Rite of passage. When I went to high school, we actually had a smoking section in the back alley. They recognized the kids were going to smoke, and they wanted them to smoke outside because they didn't want them to try to hide it in the bathroom or hide it somewhere else and possibly cause a fire. So they actually had a section for that. And many high schools when I was growing up had that too. Some people in their lives who they look up to, their models, may smoke. Cigarettes are addictive. Nicotine does produce a biological and a physiological dependence. And the research shows that people who smoke as few as 10 cigarettes early in their lives have an 80% chance of becoming a habitual smoker. Now, as smoking rates decrease, tobacco companies look for new markets. As I said, menthol, and it's, one of the things that a lot of people have been trying to push to eliminate menthol cigarettes. Um, but it hasn't changed. They used to give free samples out, believe it or not, to adolescents, to other countries. They're making millions and millions of dollars on cigarettes. And it's still working, even with no advertising per se. They send coupons out. Cigarettes aren't cheap. If you get really, kind of no name brand, you might be able to get a pack here in the United States for about $6. Most packs of cigarettes are going for around $12 for like a menthol cigarette. I have a friend who smokes at the casino, and they ran out of cigarettes, and a pack of cigarettes at the casino was $20. And I'm like, you're gonna pay $20 for a pack of cigarettes? It's like, yeah, it's not much different than 12, and I want a cigarette now. I'm like, oh, okay. So, um, it really is very addictive that you can't even go sometimes a couple hours. I see it at Mercy Hospital where I work. Um, UPMC facilities are smoke-free, but they don't stop people from smoking outside, like in the parking garage or something like that, even though they have signs posted, because they don't want people to smoke in the hospital. A couple years ago, a patient was smoking in their room and caught their room on fire. So they uh, they would prefer them if they're going to smoke. They realize that they're going out to smoke. Here, I see. Okay, somebody had a question. Yes,
It's not a question, it's just a story because I also work in
no
UPS.
questions?
Oh, do you hear me?
Okay,
No? Okay.
let's see. Uh, I think it's a couple links down. It may not be open. I'll unlock it, but it'll be available for you before the end of the night. But it's kind of a cool thing. It's short. It's maybe a minute long. I've used it in my class for the last couple years, but I will check that after class for you. Okay, and then of course you have sexually transmitted infections, HPV, thrombosis, chlamydia, genital herpes, gonorrhea, syphilis, and AIDS. I actually heard somebody say one time they were just so happy that they had gonorrhea and it wasn't AIDS. I'm like, wow. The uh, the one commercial that drives me crazy every time I see it on TV, it's for a product that controls genital herpes, and genital herpes don't go away. They can just kind of mitigate it so it's not as often or the flare-ups aren't as bad. And it's this couple, and they're like skipping along the beach saying, "Oh, I'm so happy that our herpes is controlled now." I'm like, oh my gosh, you're making it sound like it's wonderful to have herpes. Jeez, no. But be tested if you're sexually active, uh, not with the same partner, even sometimes with the same partner if your partner isn't faithful. Um, don't be afraid to be tested if you have any of the symptoms. AIDS, still out there. We just don't talk about it as much. They have the medical cocktail that is quite expensive. 25 million people have died from AIDS worldwide, and 34 million plus are living with the disease. So, how do you avoid STIs? Abstinence. Yeah, that doesn't happen very often anymore. Um, I mean, you have kids that are 8. We have a girl who was 8 who got pregnant. So, abstinence may not be the answer. It's definitely going to keep you safe from transmitting these types of diseases. But in reality, we know that's not. always the case. So practice safe sex. Avoid any type of exchange of bodily fluids. Stay sober. Uh, Women and men, you should watch for roofies, drugs that can be put in a drink. They actually make these really cool lids they're like almost like a big balloon, but you put them over your drink. So when you're not looking at your drink, nobody can slip anything into your drink that would makes you really woozy and then eventually knocks you out. And it's a possibility of you being raped, again, male or female. Um, if you're in a monogamous relationship and you're faithful to each other, uh, then you don't have to worry about the other person developing a sexually transmitted disease. Review, review, sample question, and sample short answer question. Okay. Any any questions anybody have? Yes, the HPV, the vaccine. Um, yeah, it's so easy to get it, but most people don't want to think that their kid is going to ever do anything like this, so they don't even think of it as an option. So, how's my voice? Am I still loud enough that you can hear me? Okay, thank you. Okay, let's try starting the next one, and about maybe like halfway through, I'll stop and give us a break. Okay, I have to get out of this one first. I always forget to get out of that one first. There we go. I'm getting there. So this is lecture 6.2. And this is cognitive development. So formal operations. So at adolescence, we are at formal operations. That means we can do hypodeductive thinking and reasoning. We can think abstractly. All of you are at formal operations, or you would not be able to sit here for 3.5 hours and listen to me talk to you on a computer screen. It just wouldn't happen. So give yourself a pat on the back. Reach over, pat. Yeah, according to Piaget, you are in formal operations. It can happen anywhere, between 12 to 15 is the range that Piaget puts it, but it could be a little younger for some people, a little older for others. Um, so you don't need concrete examples for everything. There may be some things, though, that you still need concrete examples. Like if somebody was trying to teach me nuclear physics, I would definitely need some help. Just don't talk to me about it. I'd be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So you may still need some concrete examples in some aspects of your life. Um, 25 to 60% of college students never develop completely into formal operations. They may have parts, like I said, but they may have struggling. Like I said, this class, especially a 6-week class, 3 credits, we're covering 27 PowerPoints. You wouldn't be able to do this if you weren't at least in some way at formal operations. You just couldn't. Okay. So you can think abstractly, you can think about behavior. Adolescents tend to be more argumentative. That's not necessarily a bad thing. They're just trying to be young adults. Parents may, go, oh my gosh, they're going to be teenagers. There's nothing wrong with teenagers. I love teenagers. They're awesome. because they can think for themselves. But yeah, they're going to challenge you, and because they're doing what they should be doing, they're growing up, they're becoming young adults, and adolescents are interesting and they can be challenging, and for some parents it can be frustrating. Especially I have a youngster who doesn't want to talk to you. That can take some time and working through that. It will happen. It just may take a while. Metacognition is usually something that people have learned about themselves by late adolescence, definitely young adulthood, how you learn and how you think. Cognitive strategies on how to learn. Do you have to study for 3 hours? Do you study for a half hour every day? Do you read and take notes? Do you use a specific type of note taking? Uh, if you all took, and because you're a summer course, you may not be from all of CCAC, you may be from a visiting college or university. Excuse me. Um, if you took the college seminar, they taught you different ways to take notes, finding a technique. Not all schools actually physically teach you how to take notes or how to study. But here at CCAC, they try to do that as part of that college seminar class that everyone has to take. It's a free 2 credit class. So, if even if you're visiting the college, you're welcome to sign up for that. Egocentrism. Now, remember back when we studied Piaget, we talked about childhood egocentrism when kids could only see things from their point of view, and they thought, everyone saw what they saw. Adolescence egocentrism is different. You do have some you know, relationship with peer pressure, but peer pressure actually isn't as strong as you would think. When we talk about adolescent egocentrism, we're talking about two distinct distortions, and you definitely want to know these. The first one is imaginary audience, and the second one is personal fable. Imaginary audience is when an adolescent thinks everyone is paying attention to them and watching them and uh, they notice anything that's different. So you have a child, you can't afford the $200 tennis shoes that they want. So you buy them at Walmart and pay $50 for them. And your kid is so upset. Everyone's going to know I got these at Walmart. I'm not going to fit in. Everyone who's anybody has these tennis shoes, and I need these tennis shoes because they think everyone's paying attention to them. They think everyone's watching them like they're on stage all the time. And in reality, when the original research was done on adolescent egocentrism, we didn't have cell phones. And for the most part, people weren't paying attention. They just thought they were. But now, everyone has a cell phone. People pull out their cell phone all the time and take pictures of people. So, in some ways, adolescents just are a little more aware that that might happen. But they're not the center of everyone's world. Everyone doesn't wake up in the morning going, "Oh, I wonder what Brad's going to do today." It's not that way. Or I can't go to school today. I have a zit on my nose. Okay, so you have a zit on the nose. Get some Clearasil and or borrow a little mom's makeup, and you'll be fine. But it can affect a young person's behavior and what they do and what they don't do. The second one is the one that's scary, and that's personal fable. Personal fable is that they believe that nothing is going to happen to them, that they're unique, they're special. Even if someone did this and this happened to them, something negative, it's not going to happen to them. They'll try more risk-taking behavior and they don't think they can die. Think about that. They don't think they can die. Young people may participate in activities. Hey, let's take some of grandma's pills. We don't know what they are. Hey, and let's wash this down with a bud. And nothing's going to happen to me. I'm 15. I have my whole life ahead of me. And it can happen to them. And it can make a huge difference in a person's life. Young people have died over foolish things. And their friends will say, well, it won't happen to me if I did the same thing. They just didn't know better. They didn't know they weren't supposed to do that. Or I drive better than them. I won't hit a patch of ice and go down an embankment. They really think that way. They think they're special and unique. I hate to tell you this, everyone. Some people never grow out of this. Some people try risky behavior all their lives because they don't think it's going to happen to them. It can happen to you. As an adult, you can rationalize that because your frontal lobe is already developed. You're 15, your frontal lobe isn't developed. It's still not sure of right from wrong, even though, like, okay, I know I'm not supposed to do that, but hey, I'm 15, I can do it. Foolish thinking. But they're thinking with an adolescent brain. So how do you blame them, right? They're not thinking as an adult. So personal fable, that's a biggie. Make sure you remember that one. I guarantee that will be on the test. Simple question, simple question. So grades have risen in high school, but is it because we are achieving more, or is it grade inflation? And what we mean by grade inflation is that, oh, you give tons of extra credit, or you don't want it to look bad, according to the administration, that your class didn't do very well. You want them all to get A's and B's. So you say there's 100 points on the test and you pull a curve. Most people got a 50. So you make 50 an A. It's just 50% of the material that they got half of it wrong, but you're giving them an A. So curving isn't necessarily a real indicator of what your students are performing. You know, the United States scores lower than most industrial nations. We have less class time, we have less intensive instruction, we have more diverse populations. Graduations rates have dropped only about 80%, roughly 79.4, I think it is, percent graduate. And again, don't have to memorize the chart, but notice this black line down here. That's the United States. That's math scores. Next to the bottom. And we spend a lot of money in our schools. Money in the school system, though, is based on whatever your tax structure is. So if you're from a wealthier community, there's more money coming into the school to use for extra teachers, smaller classes, better supplies, additional activities. If you're from a smaller community that's a poorer community, you don't have as much tax base coming in. You don't have all the money. A lot of times your teachers are paid less in that community. So you get a lot of first or second year teachers. Not that first or second years teachers aren't good. Please, I'm not saying that. It's that they don't have the in-class experience as much as someone who maybe has 20 years. Uh, as, a teacher who has been around a long time. And because money and finances are so important, they may choose to just stay 1 or 2 years and then move on to another school. And then they're replaced by another first year teacher because that's something that a district can afford. I can remember Um, when I first, I taught in a middle school, junior high for like 18 years. And then when I was worried about the school closing, I started looking for a job. I thought, okay, I have two master's degrees, 30 credits towards, additional another master's to get a doctorate. It didn't pay for the amount of money that I would make. I won a Golden Apple Award. I mean, but I had an interview like with the city schools, and they're like, "This is wonderful. You're great, but we can't hire you." I'm like, "Excuse me?" It's like, because we can get three first-year teachers for the price that we would have to pay you because of your education. Oh, so. you know, there's still budget. Budget is a factor. So a lot of times they're not going to hire the teachers that may have more experience and more training because they have a fixed budget. I'm happy where I ended up. Differences, ethnic and racial differences. Um, Poverty is still there. The, you always think of third world countries, and I guess our poverty is different than some areas of third world countries, but we still need to help our uh, economic disadvantaged young men and women. They do need help. Dropping out of school, dropouts tend to earn 42% less than graduates. Dropout unemployment rate is 50%. Some leave for different reasons: pregnancy, problems with English, economic reasons. Many of the Pittsburgh high schools, probably all of the high schools now, I would have to check on that, but most of them, I think, have what they have is an in-school daycare. So young women who had a child uh, can still continue to go to school. It becomes part of their course. Their child goes to daycare, and each young woman is given a 2-period block of time that she serves as one of the teachers in that daycare, watching the children and giving them instruction, and they learn different parenting styles, and their needs are met. Also, places like Genesis House, there's three of them in Pittsburgh that help women who are pregnant or who have had children. Um, More males drop out than females. More lower income homes drop out more for a variety of reasons. They may have to go to work. I mean, now with single parents, uh, older adolescents may have to help bring money into the family, so they drop out of school to work. Young people spend an average of 7.5 hours a day on media, and I'm betting it's more than that. Probably closer to 9 or 10, maybe some young people even more than that. Uh, they are using some form of media, phones, cell phones, as wonderful as they are. They can be very addicting. You may have heard, our state legislature is talking about banning cell phone use in the high schools and in the junior highs um, during the school day. They basically have to be in their locker or, out of their possession. Some classrooms have like lock boxes. So when you come into the classroom, your phone goes into your box, you lock it so they don't have access to it. And some schools in some other states actually have that as a practice already. You lock your phone in at the beginning of the day, and people say, well, how do we get a hold of our child if we need to talk to them? Well, you call the office like they did for, you know, 100 years, to get a hold of your child if you need to. Every now and then we have a pocket system in our classrooms. The students are allowed to use their phones at lunch and when they're at their locker, the 5 minutes in between classes, they're allowed to use them. But they're not allowed to use them in the classroom. So they either have to lock them in the locker or put it in their pocket that's on hanging in front of my classroom, and they're like assigned a number. And when that bell is over, you see them run to that phone just so they can check their messages. You know, some teens send 30,000 texts a month. Don't tell me if you're one that's sending that many texts. Sometimes they talk more on their phone than they do to each other. Cyberbullying is still a real problem. Sending victims texts or hurtful emails or posting things online about them. Because you can be anonymous, there's a way to get around it. They can be abusive, and sometimes adults do it too. So they don't necessarily grow out of it as they get older. Students do have to do work and they do have to learn how to search and choose and integrate information, but there are things out there that are objectionable. You'll come to websites that you didn't realize were like a porn site. Um, whitehouse.com is a porn site. Whitehouse.gov is the actual site for the White House. So a young child may not know the difference. You now know that if you didn't know that before. Um, Not everyone has access, but it's better, believe it or not. Something good that came out of COVID is we got technology in the hands of some children who could not afford it before, but can now have access. If they didn't have internet during COVID, things like Infinity and Verizon, or even Zoom. Zoom was free for all schools to use. This is a company that makes money on people using Zoom. Our college pays for licenses for us to use Zoom, but during COVID, all these companies came together and said the education of our young people is the most important and made it available and free. Review, review, sample question, and sample short answer question. Okay. Yes, I understand. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I think it's more summertime. Summertime, they hours. And if they don't have a curfew like for bedtime and parents don't check on them, they're going to have their phone in their bed and they can cover it very easily. So some parents, what they do is they make their kid leave their phone in the living room instead of taking it with them. Multiple medias, they have their iPhone, their iPad, their iMac. They have their Wii. Some kids have refrigerators in their room. Not kidding. I have a couple students that have little baby refrigerators in their room. They don't even have to come out except to go to the bathroom, you know. It's not unusual. I'll hear what they have, and I'm thinking, I don't even have that in my house. How do you have all that? But they do. I had one student who got paid by both his parents, so they were separated. They paid him $50 for every A he got on a report card. And you get 4 report cards a year. Boy, that's better than a part-time job. Jeez. I'm like, I wish I got $50 for an A. Huh. I feel cheated after all these years. But, things are different, and sometimes just you have to work with what the culture is. And I always laugh, when I'll hear parents say, well, it wasn't like that when, I was an adolescent. No, and the culture wasn't the same way. Yes, you were an adolescent. I was an adolescent. We were all adolescents, but we weren't an adolescent in 2026. And the world is different in 2026. So, okay, how we doing? We're still okay? Okay, how about if we take, see, I have about quarter to, how about a 10-minute break? And then we just have 6.3 to do. And I'll see you in about 10 minutes and give me a chance to rest my voice a little. Okay, everyone, welcome back. I did just copy the bird video into an announcement. So you have the link right there. Instead of going through all of Blackboard, I just copied and pasted right into the announcement. So the link is there so you can see that bird video. And we're down to the last section. So this gives you an idea of how like next week will work. So it'll be the same way I'll teach for the first part. This would be about the time that I would give the break. You'll get 15 minutes, and then we would do the test. When you're done with the test, you just highlight the test like you did before, or give me the answers. You'll send that back to me. And when I get the test, I actually will send you an email right back because I'm going to check to make
What
sure I can
happens if I
open it,
can't hear? Oh, it's on
and I'll
front.
send back to you, yes, I got your test. And as soon as you get that email back from me, then you can get off of Zoom. You don't have to stay on Zoom. So people who need longer to take the test will be able to take longer. People who are done in 25 minutes, then you're done and you can work on your, paper that's due the last week. Yes, Diana, question?
Yeah, I just want to. Do you hear me?
No question? Okay. Okay. And share.
Oh, you other people hear me?
Okay, so
I
this
hear
is the
you.
I hear
I'm
psychological
you.
so
and social
confused.
I hear
development.
you
It's
too.
about 35 slides.
It's okay.
So,
Professor?
and like I said, the first 23 of these slides are actually filmed on
Hi,
YouTube and then of course I'll post this to YouTube also with the whole lecture.
Miss Shabluski.
So self-concept as an adolescent, um,
Okay, I think it's
who
her.
are you? That's who you're trying to figure out who you are. Early adolescence, we tend to have a more organized view of who we are, what we like, looking at our traits. We're outgoing, you're easygoing, you're happy, you're extroverted, you're introverted, and there are hundreds of different traits. But figuring out who they are, they do take a little bit of a read from other people, and that's why self-esteem can be an issue. Um, do you like yourself? That's an important thing. And there might be some aspects of yourself you like and some things you don't like about yourself. And there are sometimes you don't care if people like it about yourself as long as you like it about yourself. This is where self-esteem isn't as important as self-efficacy. So if you learn nothing else in this course, you need self-efficacy to succeed in life. Belief in yourself that you can accomplish whatever, even if you have some stumbling blocks around the way, that you can accomplish it. Self-esteem by adolescence, early adulthood. People may say things about you. You're the one who chooses to believe it or not. You don't have to accept what people say about you. Oh, this or that. I always give the sample, and I give this sample to my students too, in high school. People say, "Wow, you're really fat." It's like, "Wow, that's very observant of you to notice that I'm fat." You are absolutely correct. I am fat, but I can go on a diet and lose weight. You're just an arrogant SOB that I don't, because I know who I am by this point in my life. And you learn as you get older to accept certain things about yourself and change the things that you don't like about yourself. But you don't live and die based on what other people say about you. You learn if you like yourself. And like I said, if there are things about yourself you don't like, you change. It took me, said 10 years to lose 100 pounds, but I did. I lost 100 pounds. But it was because I wanted to lose 100 pounds, not because, when I was a kid, they didn't allow me to be on the cheerleading squad because I was overweight or, playing certain sports. Oh, you can't. I used to play tennis for 3 hours a day, every day in the summer. And I'm still a fat kid, but it didn't stop me because after a while you learn about who you are. And that's what kids are doing. They're learning who they are. They're making that self-assessment. And it shouldn't depend on what other people say about them. But some children having the defense mechanisms to deal with that. See, when you're younger, you don't have that life experience. So if somebody says you're fat, you're ugly, you walk funny, you're a certain color, you're from a certain neighborhood, it hurts because you don't know how to deal with that. But when you get older, you learn who you are and you learn, hey, this is me. And if you like me, great. If you don't like me, your loss, you know? Not being arrogant about myself, but anybody, you have to learn who you are. And that's what you're doing in adolescence. You're learning who you are. Girls have a lower self-esteem in general than boys do. And a lot of that is society's perceptions. Girls are supposed to look a certain way and act a certain way, and guys are supposed to look a certain way and act a certain way. But, there are stereotypes for boys that can add pressure. They're supposed to be tough in all situations. I'll ask my students sometimes, like, when can boys cry? More now than before, but, pretty much guys as a society, we're only allowed to cry if somebody died or if you were physically hurt, like in pain, serious pain, or if your sports team lost. Not kidding. You could cry for athletics, but not for many other things. So it's much more open, you know. Uh, a young boy growing up and their pet goldfish dies. And the parent says, "Why are you crying? It's a fish." Flush. Girls, we were given the opportunity to have a little burial, go out, dig a little grave, say a few words, maybe write a poem for the fish, put some flowers on it. And it was okay to cry. It's gotten better for guys. And when's the one time girls aren't supposed to cry? If you're in positions of power. You shouldn't cry. Society looks at you in a negative way if you show that type of emotion. Eric Erickson's stage at this time, this is identity versus identity confusion, which makes perfect sense since we're just talking about this now. Adolescents, are uh, learning what's unique about themselves, what they can do, what they can't do, if it's something they do that's dysfunctional, something that isn't going to help them further their life in a positive way. That's something that they learn along the way. If they fail in something, and they have to learn to set new goals and boundaries. Societal pressures, sure, they look to their friends and their peers for some help, but again, the end result, the end decision has to be the young person's decision of securing an identity. Adolescents rely more on peers sometimes than adults or their parents, but in general, for big decisions, they're still looking to parents when we're talking in adolescence. Where an emerging adult would be 18 to 25, they are looking more to themselves and their peers than their parents. The next stage would be intimacy versus isolation, and that's going to be that emergent adult portion, the 18 and above. Sometimes uh, peer pressure can cause some issues where they kind of take a moratorium, and we need that they kind of take a pause at doing something. They may let go of responsibilities and explore something new. That's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing if if you don't know what you want to do in life. It's okay to take a pause. Not everyone goes to college. Not everyone travels the world. Not everyone gets a job right away. You know, everyone is unique and an individual. So, Erickson's issue was, he, just like Freud, based most of his research on male-oriented concepts. Carol Gilligan's the one who did the research on women. She also researched men too. She did both, but she was the first person who was really looking at women and identity and especially their moral development. James Marcia. And I believe I have the Marcia activity on your Blackboard page. Um, it's not a requirement. You don't have to do it, but you may want to look at it because it gives you a further understanding of these particular four concepts. Like I have it spelled out. When we did them, if I had it in class, like an in-person class, I would play four songs and the students would have to figure out, having the lyrics, which song suggests each one of these particular categories of identity. And, I had like The River by Springsteen and, Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For by YouTube, so they're up there. So if you're interested in that, and the further explanation that I give you right now on identity achievement, foreclosure, moratorium, and diffusion, it is on Blackboard. I will open that, but you're not required to do that. Again, because of the short of time, you already have quite a bit you have to accomplish. So James Marcia says there are four different categories. Identity achievement is pretty straightforward. And it's the one that you hope most people will eventually get to. That means they achieve their goal, whatever that goal may be. They have a positive experience with wanting to do something. Identity foreclosure is when the young person didn't get to decide. Somebody made the decision for them. So let's say you want to go to school to be an artist, but everyone in your family is a lawyer. Everyone. Your brothers, your sisters, your mom, your dad, your grandparents, and they expect you to be a lawyer, and they come out and say, hey, you can do art all you want on your own, but you need a life that's going to pay money, so you're going to go to school to be a lawyer. And you're like, well, I want to be an artist. It's like, well, then we're not paying for your college education, and you become a lawyer. Now, being a lawyer isn't a bad thing. I mean, you're going to make decent money, you're going to have a fulfilling career, and you can do your art on the side. but you weren't the one who really chose that. That decision was really made for you. Identity moratorium isn't a bad thing either. Moratorium means you take a break. So you don't make a decision yet. And the key word there is yet. So instead of from high school going to college, you decide you're going to take 2 years off to do some traveling and get a job and get some cash so you can go to the college that you want to go to get, the education you want, or you're just going to get a job and maybe move somewhere and experience life in a different location. You're just taking a pause. Eventually, you're going to make a decision and then you're going to be identity achieved. So you can move to that next identity level that we like. The last one is the tough one. This is identity diffusion. And this is, you don't make any decisions. You don't really know what you want. You're like a straw blowing in the wind. One week you're doing this, the next week, I don't like that. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And there's nothing wrong with exploring if you're at that moratorium and eventually you get to identity achievement. But if you never get there, and there are some people that never get there, they have 4 or 5 different jobs every year. They don't know what they want, they don't care. They just kind of do whatever. So, it's during this adolescence and early adulthood that identity gets kind of fixed for us. When we talk about Marcia versus Erickson, when we talk about crisis, again, we're not talking about world destruction, things falling apart, things like that. We're talking about making choices and what are the choices and how we choose from all the alternatives, and then making the commitment. So that identity achievement, identity foreclosure, even identity moratorium, you're making some sort of commitment. Even moratorium because you're saying, well, I just want to take a break and then I'm going to go back and do what I need to do. And then here's kind of a couple examples. Again, if you don't want to go look at the Marcia activity because you don't have to do it. This just gives you a little breakdown of kind of a summary of an example for each one. Depression and suicide. Yeah, adolescent depression, the research says about 3%. It's actually higher than that. It's probably closer to 6 since COVID. It's like 6.1, 6.2%. COVID really did a number on our teenagers and our young people, and we're still seeing that in the school system. Not only adolescents, but young adults also. Sometimes it's biological, sometimes it's environmental. In that case, COVID would fall under those two, and social, because they couldn't be with their friends. They couldn't play their sports. Especially seniors, some of them didn't get a prom, graduation. You were 6 feet away. Girls have a higher incidence of depression, and then Black adolescents have a higher rate of depression in general than whites, and Native Americans have the highest rate. They also have the highest rate of alcoholism and drug use. So, what can lead to depression? If they've lost someone, mom, dad, girlfriend, boyfriend, grandparent. Some children are very, very close to their grandparents, um, and anyone very important to them. And it doesn't only cause depression in adolescence. Of course, it can cause depression in any age. I always share my old boss at Kennywood, his son graduated from college, and the day after his graduation, he committed suicide. No note, no anything. Um, and it was really hard for Dad to deal with that. And all the people that knew him, here was this young person who was just turning 22 and had the whole world ahead of him. And he had a girlfriend. It wasn't like they broke up. There was no real connection to why it happened. Um, but definitely depression had to be somewhere in there. Uh, if you grew up with a depressed parent, there's a higher rate of seeing depression in the adolescent. If you're unpopular at school or in the workplace or in the neighborhood, or if you've been rejected by someone or a group of people. So, adolescent suicide rates have tripled in the last 30 years. These are some scary statistics, everyone. So, one teenage suicide every 90 minutes. Girls attempt more, but boys complete it, and that's because of the choice of weapon that they use. Males choose more violent methods. Males tend to use hanging, a gun, jumping out of a window, things like that. Girls tend to do overdose of drugs or cutting, like cutting their wrists. Um, one of every 200 attempts is successful. Again, why? There's so many things. You think about what's going on in our world. Depression, social inhibition, perfectionism, feeling that they need to be perfect, stress, family conflict, abuse, drugs, alcohol, and cluster suicides. Anytime there's a suicide in a school, we always worry. You always bring extra counselors in, especially if a lot of attention was given to that student who committed suicide. Um, Even attention like that that's negative, someone who's striving and just dying and starving for attention may want to get that same attention. So it's like, well, I'm going to copy that. So we call them copycats or cluster suicides. Some of the warnings, sometimes there's none. Straightforward. Sometimes there are just no warnings, but some subtle warnings that you can, if they directly or indirectly talk about suicide, if they're having difficulties in school, especially if they didn't have difficulties before, they start making arrangements. They give away their prized possessions, you know. Hey, Billy, here, I'm giving you my cell phone. That's your brand new iPhone 17 Pro. Yeah, I won't need it. Oh, did you get another phone? No, but I don't need it here. I want you to have it. Red flag. That's a biggie. Young people aren't giving away their phones. Yeah, they live with that phone. Some of them sleep with their phone. Their hands are curled like around the phone. They write a will. Loss of appetite, where they had an appetite before, or excessive eating. Again, overeating to compensate, emotional eating, we call that. Just general depression, their sleep pattern changes, they can't sleep at night, they're always tired during the day. Lethargy, they're just, you know, no affect. Um, any type of dramatic change in behavior. So if they were easygoing before and now they're ornery and cranky and miserable, and I mean, we're just not talking about some of the like hormonal changes that may occur just naturally in adolescence. We're talking you can tell the difference between what they were before and a preoccupation with death. Sample question. So you can see, like, I would give a scenario here and you would have to pick one. Okay. Autonomy. Again, adolescents seek autonomy. They want to try to do some things on their own, and it's going to increase as they get older. And parent-child relationship is going to change as they get older too. And it's up to the parent to give them a little bit of room to spread their wings. Not that you just let them do everything that they want to do, but you don't hover over them and don't let them make no decisions at all. And it does make a difference on what culture you're in. Again, individualistic cultures like the United States versus collective cultures like Eastern traditions can be different. Here in the United States, since we are an individual culture, we do give more freedom to our young people than in many of the Eastern cultures. Western adolescents seek autonomy earlier than Eastern parts, and in the United States, males are permitted more autonomy early than females are. And will they fight with their parents? Yes. Think about it. Did you fight with your parents? Yes. I'm not saying knock out, drag out fights. You weren't at home threatening to stab them while they were sleeping. Well, hopefully you weren't. But, you know, sure, they're gonna argue for their point of view. They're gonna be assertive. And yeah, it can cause some conflict in the family, but it's perfectly normal. You as parents will survive, and so will the young person. That trying to push the boundaries. The boundaries are still there, but trying to push the boundaries, you want them to grow up. You want them to be young adults, to be able to make decisions. And generally, by the end of adolescence, the conflict is resolved. They're getting along with their parents. Now, there are going to be some cases that they may not. You always have that. But in general, they are. Okay? So parents begin to look at their teens differently as they get older, and teens look at their parents more and why they may make certain decisions and choices, especially if they go back and they look to that. So, conflicts, like I said, tend to resolve by the end of adolescence. Um, some things that uh, may fight over, or things of what's appropriate, what's inappropriate conduct. They learn uh, about why the parents have certain rules, and sometimes parents have to make some rules to kind of help young people. I always say it's okay to use your parent as a scapegoat. Like you really don't want to go to the party. You really don't want to go because they're going to be doing things, drugs, alcohol. You don't want to do that. But you don't want to say that to your friends that you don't want to go to the party because you're still not quite confident enough in yourself and what your friends are going to think about you. So you don't want to say that. But you could say, well, my parents. They would kill me if I went to that party and that happened. I can't go. My parents won't let me. And your parents won't mind being the scapegoat because you save face, they take the blame. That's their role as a parent, right? So it's okay to use your parents as a safe scapegoat. Peers are the people around us, the relationships we have. Some are more critical than others. And at this time in our life, it's probably more critical than any other time in our life. We use each other to, hey, are we okay? Or do we fit in? Or are we different? It doesn't mean that we're bad if we're different. It just means we're different. But we do look to each other at this time period. There are reference groups. These are the people that we compare ourselves to. We don't compare ourselves to everyone. They're the people that we hang around with. They're the people in our school or on our place of work or on our football team or on our volleyball team or on the cheerleading squad or on our dance group. Or these are the people we're around. That's who our reference group is. And those groups that we're involved in are the ones that set the norms and the standards that we as an adolescent will judge our social success, judge if we're doing the right thing. The difference between a clique and a crowd, you should know the difference for the test. A clique is 2 to 12 people who frequently meet. A crowd is a larger group. They have something in common, but don't necessarily interact with everyone. So a clique could be, the chess club. It could be the offensive line of the school football team. It could be, forensics. It could be student council. It could be just the kids that get on your bus at your bus stop. That's a clique, the people that you meet together and you talk to and, share things in common. A crowd is one that has something in common. So here in the city of Pittsburgh, many Pittsburghers love the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? They'll wear the yellow and gold, and the black and gold, excuse me, and they have their terrible towels. And when they're on Sundays, it's a football party, and everyone gathers around and cheers them on. But you don't know all the people who love the Steelers. You don't hang out with all the people that love the Steelers. You hang out with a group, but you don't necessarily have any other connection to them. You may never even talk to these people. You just see each other across the bar, or you see each other, across the stadium seats. Okay. So a crowd does still have expectations on how people should behave. So you break those expectations, the crowd may stare you down, may say something to you. Now, does that mean you'll stop doing it? Sometimes, depending on what you're doing. So membership in cliques and crowds, it's based on how close you are or how similar you are to the group of people. And there are labels, and people make judgments about people, and sometimes whether you have interaction with them or not, you may not even have real knowledge. You just learn from the group. So you may hate Cleveland Brown fans, but you've never met a single Cleveland Brown fan. But you hate them, at least on Sundays in football. Other days, they might be okay. Cleveland and Pittsburgh are very much alike, both hardworking towns, people, good people. But we hate them on football games. See what I mean? We put a label on them and make a judgment about them, even though we have no direct contact with them. There are changes that happen in adolescence with gender. So, girls at first used to play, they start out playing with girls, boys with boys, and then puberty happens. And now we start hanging out with mixed groups, so a group of friends, males or female, go out or get together. And by the end of adolescence, those cliques have less of a powerful effect on males or females. If you like a person, you go out with that person, even if the people you're hanging out with don't like them, you're still going to go out with them. Popularity and rejection. Okay, you want to know these four, hint, hint. Popular adolescents, that's pretty straightforward, right? These are the ones that people like. They can seem to do no wrong. Everyone likes them, okay, for whatever reason. Controversial adolescents, some people like them, some people don't like them. They don't care if you don't like them. They don't care if you like them. They have a standpoint or a belief, and they say their belief. And if some people like it, okay, good. And if some people don't like it, okay, that's fine. Rejected. They are uniformly disliked. These are the children that we worry about, the young adults that are not included. They are pushed aside. They are ostracized. They are eliminated from participating. They are just disliked for whatever reason. And I mean, you're all very young, so you don't really remember Columbine, but the two young men who went in shooting up the school, they were rejected adolescents, and they wanted to get back at the school. Neglected adolescents are neither liked or disliked. So it's not necessarily negative in the way that they feel in general like a rejected person where they've been pushed aside. It's just some people like, okay, they're fine, they're there. You'll talk to them and they're there, or you won't talk to them. You just, they're not really connecting to anyone. And that's the other ones that we worry about. And many schools have found, and the research shows, if you can get young people involved in the school, it doesn't matter what club, it doesn't matter what sport, if you can get that connection. And this is even at the college level. So CCAC works really, really hard to try to do this. Since we're a commuter college, it's a lot harder. But they have all these different activities and they'll have social events. Once a month you can get ice cream and anybody can use the gym. There's some awesome gym equipment and it doesn't cost you anything because you have a CCAC ID card. You don't have to go to Planet Fitness, it's right there. Every campus has a gym. Now they do have limited hours, but you still can do that. Um, so you have the opportunity to connect to the college because they want to keep you engaged. They want to keep you here at college to complete your studies and go through and feel like you belong because you're not all on campus at the same time, you know. So we have a great college baseball team, but I don't know how many of our students have actually gone to a baseball game. See what I mean? Conformity and peer pressure. Again, peer pressure does have some influence on young people conforming their behaviors and attitudes. For others, adolescents will look to, experts or they'll look to older adults. We don't see this huge rise in adolescence. It's there. Usually something had to happen that peer pressure would become, you know, something that they would really see a major increase in a young person's life. More likely, it's the other direction. They tend to not conform as much as they establish who they are. That self-identity is really important. Sample question and sexual behavior. By 16, 90% of teens have had at least one date. And dating is the way we learn to establish intimacy. Again, intimacy in psychology is not sex. Passion is sex. Intimacy is relationship. Always remember the difference. Most dating early adolescence, so 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 is pretty superficial. True intimacy we see more in late adolescence, 18, 19, 20. You remember, adolescence originally went till 25, so those years. Uh, Dating can be challenging for people who have not come out in their sexual orientation. Dating race and ethnicity, it has in many ways definitely decreased. We see culture and dating patterns changing as people become more open and more aware and understanding of other people's traditions and their beliefs and their neighborhoods. And especially when you get to college, you meet people from all different ages, all different walks of life. So dating can occur with anyone. It's not just one particular type of person. Masturbation is a way for young people to be sexually active. It's very much widespread. There doesn't cause any harm. Some people still feel guilty and shame, but psychologists say, it's normal and healthy and harmless. Many religious traditions still frown upon that. Um, and, of course, parents may be quite surprised when their 13-year-old is using a sock in a way that they never thought a sock would be used. Sexual intercourse, ages of first intercourse are declining. So, in other words, they're getting younger. 1 in 5 adolescents have had sex before 15. 3/4 have had sex before 20. Give me 1 second. I just want to take a sip. I'm almost there. I might make it. Many teens are postponing sex. So, when we talk about changes, um, in some ways it's changed, in some ways it's become more available. There is definitely a double standard. It's seen as more permissible for males, but not as much for females. And a lot of people have put together these two terms, permissiveness with affection. Um, if you're allowed to do it, hey, we feel good about it, we like each other, hey, why not? Intercourse is permissible for both males and females as a long-term commitment. Um, but if young people, early adolescents, are participating in sexual intercourse, it is still, in general, frowned upon. Again, sexual activity, don't have to memorize the chart, but you can see there's not a big difference between girls and guys as we get older, adolescence and into young adulthood. Again, sexual orientation, 4 to 10% of men and women are exclusively homosexual. We also have bisexual, transsexual, intersexual. Um, when we talk about sexual orientation, it is so much more open now than it was when I was growing up. You just didn't talk about this. And even 25 years ago, I had a very close friend that finally came out to me. Said, I didn't know how you'd react. It's like, you've known me for years. Of course, I'm going to accept you how you are. And he was so worried. He never told his parents. He finally told his sisters, never told his brother, definitely didn't tell his dad because he was afraid. He was afraid that the relationship would change because he felt he knew how his parents would react. So there's still many challenges out there. Uh, Depression, they can be easily victimized. Just horrible crimes have been committed. Um, it's harder. And again, our society has changed attitudes to be more accepting. We're not always still there. I mean, there are still people out there that don't, but we are much, much more open than we were. Teenage pregnancy, slight decrease, yay, in the last 2 decades. From 1912, the birth rate was the lowest in 7 decades. Pregnancy rates are 34 per thousand teens. So, what are some reasons for this? Awareness, actually teaching and talking to students about unprotected sex. Um, Use of contraceptives, schools having the availability to contraceptives in the nurse's office, in restrooms. They're right there at the counter, at the checkout counter, so you don't have to ask the pharmacist for it, where you could be nervous, especially if you're a teenager, especially if it's the family drugstore that people have been going to for all their years and you know the pharmacist. Um, but when we talk about means to stop it, virginity pledges have not helped. Just writing, they're saying, I'm not going to have sex until marriage. That has had no impact on whether young people have sex or not. Unintended pregnancies can be devastating to both the mother and the child. Sometimes mothers have to drop out or take lower paying jobs or have child assistance. Children born to teens have poor health in general because many times those teens weren't planning on getting pregnant. So mom wasn't eating correctly, especially like no folic acid, which is necessarily for brain and spinal cord development. And children born to teens are more likely to become teen parents themselves. Sample question, sample question. And I can't believe it. My voice actually made it. Thank you for your patience with my voice. I know it was kind of, you know. Okay, any questions in general? We're just going to go over everything like for next week again, just so I again thank you so much for your patience. I usually pride myself on having the test done, but I was just so sick the last 2 days. So I will get those tests graded. I'll start them later tonight, and then if not by tonight, tomorrow. So you'll have in your email, you'll have your score, so you'll know what you got on your test. If you have any reason that you can't be in class next week, you're going to have to let me know because we're going to have to schedule a time for the Zoom test. You have to be on camera for the test. So make sure you have a camera that actually operates. Borrow one if you have to from the college or use your phone, so you can do it. If you have to print out the test, if that works better than you looking and highlighting, that's fine. You can print out the test. But your answers are either gonna, and you don't want to send me a picture of every single page. That would be like 10 pages, you know. So just write down the answers. Either take a picture of the answers. If you're doing just the answers, you just need the letter. So 1A, 2B, etc. I will send and open the link for the essay questions. I'll try to do that tonight. The latest I'll do it is tomorrow morning, but I'll try to do that tonight. And I think it's a choice of 4 or 5 out of 6. So just pick the ones that you know. Remember, you're allowed to use your book for that. You're not permitted to use your book during the test next week. So no book, no internet, no help from anybody else or any outside source. That would be an automatic F. And you're already 2/3 of the way through the course and doing very well. So you don't want to mess up for that. Uh, any other questions that you may have? Test will be around 45 multiple choice questions. Again, 4 through 6, all the PowerPoints. There are a lot of questions from adolescents. there are questions from the other ones, but there's a good chunk coming from adolescents. So make sure you go over these PowerPoints. I'll upload the video. I might be able to do it right now, since we're done early. If not, it'll be up by tomorrow too. And let's see, are we to type the test questions in the Word? No, you don't type the questions. You just give me the answers. So you're just going to give me the answers. And the essay question, you're just going to say what question you're going to have to tell me what question you answered. You could just do 1, 4, 5. You could tell me the numbers. Just make sure I know which question you're answering for the essays. And you'll just attach that at the same time when you send the multiple choice. So don't send them separately. You're going to send them in the same email when you send it back to me. There's greater chance of something getting lost if you send them as two separate emails, so you could just put it in. And since it's a Word document, if you wanted to, you could just add it to the bottom of the test like I had before. And you can just type your answer right into the test. But you can write it on a piece of paper. Excuse me. You can write it on a piece of paper and take a picture of it. Whatever works. It just, the goal was that I get your answers. Sorry. I guess 2.5 hours is pushing the limit of my voice. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to text me or send me an email. And other than that, have a good night.
Hi, I had a quick question.
Questions?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
No questions?
Hello?